This is David Rosendahl, and he is president and co-founder of MindFire, which seems to be the intersection of direct mail and social media and email, which is really a neat and probably unique concept. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that.
Thank you, Jan. Yeah, you articulated it. Looks like you've looked around at the MindFire ecosystem, and that is how we see ourselves as a technology company at the intersection of offline and online media, and often that offline media is direct mail. And accordingly, a big part of our customer portfolio are commercial printers and their clients. So I'm excited to get into it. Let's dive into the conversation.
And ad agencies too, as well, right?
Correct. Yeah. So we really focus on what we call service providers, and generally that's commercial printers, agencies, and marketing services companies. And we are equipping them with technology and services and support to create what we call omni-channel campaigns, as you've articulated, and help them build those and execute those for their customers, to help their customers, whether it be growing their brand, generating more leads, driving sales, any of those objectives, omni-channel helps with.
I work in areas where it's been a lot of digital marketing, but I come from a traditional marketing background and driven by ROI. You're not the only one who's talked about the topic of the death of direct mail. I don't think it's dead, but I'm looking forward to your explanation about it. What I would like to see is more people incorporate it into their entire marketing mix.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you raised there. So we often will go out to market with this headline or with a topic around this idea of direct mail being dead. And the reason why we do that is because we have found that resonates with our market, with our audience. And usually what we're doing is we're illustrating how direct mail isn't dead. And the fact that it isn't dead is supported by data and our customers' activities. Generally, what's happening is this direct mail is being supported and made more interactive through the use of digital technology, whether that be social media, as you've mentioned, or email, other digital channels. And so whenever we say direct mail isn't dead or direct mail ain't dead, that's one of the headlines that we often use. Yeah. We know it resonates. We know it gets attention. And we know that for our core constituency, specifically like commercial printers, for example, that's a theme that they're very tuned into. Right. And so that's why we use that. And it often leads to great conversations and opportunities for us to help our clients.
I can see that. A lot of the people that I work with focus on social media and email. So I'd like to see them start to branch out and add this. But one of the things is today's direct mail is not your father's direct mail. You talk about enhanced direct mail, and maybe you can describe what that is.
Sure. Yeah, that's another phrase that we often use. That's why I was laughing at that. Yeah, so really direct mail, there's so many ways I could talk about. There's really so many interesting things happening with direct mail. I'll give you a couple of stories. As an example, I was at a trade show with a client not too long ago, actually working their booth. And this was a trade show that was primarily digital focused, meaning all the exhibitors, all the attendees were mostly talking about digital, whether that be Facebook ads, Instagram, TikTok, things like that. And we were the only organization there that was talking about print and specifically direct mail. And I can't tell you how many, let's say 30 to 40-year-old mid-level marketing managers walked up to the booth. And when we said, hey, this is what we're doing, and we use direct mail to accomplish these objectives, they said, wait, what is that? What do you mean?
Seriously? Oh my God.
Yeah, it was very eye-opening. It was informative and also really exciting for us to realize, to be reminded that there is this whole new generation, if you will, of mid-level managers rising up inside of these brands and organizations that are out there who grew up on digital and who don't know that direct mail can be targeted in much the same way that they're accustomed to with Facebook ads, LinkedIn, and other digital forms of advertising. I share that story just to say that, first of all, there was this whole realization that direct mail can be very targeted, can be made personalized, and actually can operate much in the same way that they're accustomed to with digital Facebook ads and so on. The other reason I mentioned that is because once we talk to them about, hey, look, a direct mail piece gives you an opportunity to actually get inside the home, to provide a visceral experience for the recipient, and then to link somebody from that physical direct mail piece to the web using a personalized URL, for example, a PURL. And then all of these other digital channels can come into play at that point, really was eye-opening for these folks. And so when you say the direct mail of today isn't your father's direct mail, it's true. It's because the digital channels are being wrapped around that direct mail, and it's making direct mail that much more effective. And that's what gets us up every day. That's what I'm so pumped up and excited about. And that's what our organization does, helping our customers do that for their clients. And there's a lot of exciting innovation happening in direct mail.
I think a lot of people don't realize that their web visitors can be, they're used to the retargeting term by using digital ads to retarget somebody who's come and not done an action. But you can actually, 70% of the time, find that direct mail connection. And people get so little physical mail that I think they're surprised, if not delighted, when something comes in direct mail. One of the things I talk about a lot is lumpy mail or direct dimensional mail. And those kinds of things really pique people's interest. And when you're having a hard time getting through and somebody's not answering voicemail, they're not answering email, direct mail can make you stand out. And people take notice, and then they may react at that. And there's a lot of cases where people talk about how they got somebody to finally connect with them or take their phone call or set up that meeting because the direct mail piece was that one touch in a sequence that got the people to do something. And some people do campaigns that are months long where they send out something every couple of weeks. There's a touch going on every 2 weeks in perpetuity to keep somebody in their program with them. So when one of the things I love to talk about is performance marketing and ROI. Can you talk about how you measure it, and then maybe give an example of cost so that we can see, yes, we understand big companies can do this, but small people can do this as well, right?
Sure. Yeah. So probably the easiest way to describe this is to just give you an example of a real life scenario. So I'm not at liberty to share the name of this customer, but it's a large financial services institution that one of our clients services. And just to give you an idea of the scope of what we're talking about here, they're sending somewhere in the order of 7 to 8 million direct mail pieces a month, targeted at businesses and consumers to provide a variety of financial services products to those recipients. And so that's just to give you an idea of the scale. Those direct mail pieces, they experiment with a variety of different types, variety of different formats, but all of them incorporate a personalized URL. And I know we're going to talk about QR codes here in a moment as well.
Right.
And a QR code there on the mail piece. And those link over to a personalized microsite that's set up in a nutshell to engage that individual and turn that activity into a lead. So to give you an idea of kind of the cost, out the door, these direct mail pieces in this specific case are somewhere around $1 going out the door. That includes everything. Of course, it can cost more. We see this used on postcards, which can be significantly less in some cases. The actual technology itself is usually a penny or a few pennies or a fraction of a penny, depending on the volume. And the way we go to market with this, as I've mentioned, is through the agencies and the commercial printers that we discussed a moment ago. And they license our technology, and then they weave this into the direct mail and the campaign and the marketing services that they're selling to their client. So sometimes they wrap it all as one fee. Sometimes there's an incremental fee to add in these digital elements. It really depends on how the service provider takes that to their customer. But does that kind of give you an idea of kind of the scope of what we're talking about?
And I think most people understand that direct mail is going to vary in cost depending upon the complexity of the piece. So that's understandable. But I wanted people to understand you don't need a fortune if you're an entrepreneur. There's ways that you can get out there and do something that makes a statement too. So it's not just big companies that can really take advantage of this.
Oh, yeah.
but I love the way that it's got that neat technology to take the web visitor and give them something physical. I
Absolutely.
just think that's one of the neatest things that it can do these days.
Yeah.
Then you talk about Facebook when you run Facebook ads, how that can drive your ability with that too. So maybe you can talk about how Facebook ads drive this too.
Sure. Yeah, there's a couple of different ways, Jan, but it's interesting. A lot of people don't know that this is even possible. But as an example, let's go back to that scenario I just laid out a second ago, the 7 to 8 million direct mail pieces per month going out for this financial services company. So let's imagine that you have that population of 7 million people, addresses that you're mailing to. What we can do is take that list of 7 million and basically, I'll put it in air quotes here. If you're listening to the podcast, you can't see me doing this, but if you're watching the video, we can upload that to Facebook, and Facebook will help us find those people on their platform. So it'll match up the list to those individuals there on Facebook. Now, what does that do for us? That gives us the ability, Jan, to then, in advance of that direct mail hitting home or hitting the recipient's location, the brand can actually start to put impressions, posts, content in front of those people to warm them up. That's one way of easily understanding what the capability is there, so that Jane or John or Jan or Dave, a few days in advance of getting that physical mail piece, can be scrolling through Facebook, whether it be at work or at home or before they go to bed or when they wake up in the morning. And, oh, there's an interesting company. See it in their feed. Maybe they don't even interact with it. That's what I often tell clients. They don't even need to interact with it. The fact that they've seen it
an impression,
creates a
right?
Brand impression. Yep. Then the next day, they're in their mailbox. They get this mail piece. They see something that looks like that ad that they saw or that post. They don't even necessarily know it's an ad. And there's an element of recognition there. And what we find is that helps boost response rates, build brand, and create more engagement for that direct mail. Does that make sense?
That's awesome. So you get them before the physical piece comes to their door.
That's right.
Mind-blowing.
Yeah, that's right.
I love it. What a great concept. That's a perfect, really interesting way to do this and keep in touch with these people. Now, one of the things that I noticed was you did a webinar and you talked about QR codes and how those can be used. And all of a sudden, I'm seeing a lot of talk about QR codes. It seems like more companies are offering them. You can have them in different shapes and sizes. They're not stuck to one specific. So I saw one that was in the shape of a present this morning. So I'm starting to see a lot of interest there. Talk about QR codes and what that can do in direct mail, as well as we know that you can use it on television or video and get people to go to a certain link that you had in mind.
Yeah, look, Jan, I don't know necessarily who's listening or who's watching. If you're listening to the podcast or watching the video right now, you might be thinking, Jan and Dave are talking about QR codes. That's so 15 years ago. But I would have to say that you should challenge that assumption that QR codes are of the past. What's really interesting here, Jan, is that we've noticed that there was a surge in interest and a surge in use of QR codes, let's call it 10 years ago. And then they fizzled out a little bit. One of the reasons being that it was difficult to get the consumer to install an app on their mobile device to actually read the QR code. I don't know if you remember, there were numerous apps, but they were buggy. They didn't work that well. They were hard to use. They were inconsistent. There's two things that have happened since then. Number one, COVID, the pandemic. And number two, in most modern phones, the camera app on your phone has a built-in QR code reader. What that means is that all you have to do is open up the camera and point it at the QR code, and you can jump to the online location. So the confluence of the camera apps evolving to include the QR code reader and COVID, which has created this increasingly touchless world. When you go out to a restaurant, most of you have seen now, you can get the memo
the
through
menu
a QR
is in the QR code. Yeah,
exactly.
And you're right. I think COVID has trained more people that they need to be aware of this. I've seen some really interesting uses in print pieces with QR codes also. So I think it's being used. People are getting more creative with it.
Yep.
And I think we're just going to see more of it.
Yeah, we've definitely seen an increase. In fact, we just had a MindFire product release yesterday or the day before that added even some additional QR code functionality. So if anybody's listening or watching thinking, hey, QR codes are from the last decade, I would just challenge you folks. There's some really new and exciting things like Jan is saying that we're seeing. Let's just use the direct mail example. You send a direct mail to somebody. You want to make it easy for them to respond. So they can visit a personalized URL. They can call a tracked phone number, or pull out their phone and point it at the piece and jump to something online. And as you mentioned, Jan, there's all sorts of innovative use cases that we're seeing. There's different creative approaches to the art, if you will, embedded in the QR code. So there's a lot of exciting things happening there for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I want you to talk about your platform because again, what you guys do seems to be unique. I really haven't heard of anybody that's got the same focus you do and the ability, the spectrum of the things that you can integrate for people. So maybe talk about your platform.
Sure. I think the easiest way for me to talk about that is to talk about the challenge that we are solving and the problem that it addresses. And specifically, that is that for most organizations, many people, many companies, if you think about folks, let's just say over the past few years around how your marketing has performed and the challenges that you've had in marketing, most executives that we speak to, most marketing executives say that it's gotten harder to reach and engage one's market. And if you find yourself nodding and saying, yeah, I've seen that, or I've heard that, or I've felt that within our own marketing or in our marketing efforts, one of the reasons that is because where people pay attention, where the consumer, whether that's B2B or B2C, where they're focused right now is different than it was a year ago or 3 years ago or 10 years ago. In other words, you have to find the right channels. You have to find the right places where the market is paying attention, and that changes. That evolves over time. That moves. Attention moves. What you have to be married to is where your audience's attention is and where it's moved to. Yeah, it's easy, let's say, to do that one-on-one. If I know, for example, Jan, that you like to text, I'll text you. If I know that Bob likes to get a phone call, I'll call Bob. But to do that at scale, and to do that, like I gave this example of the 7 or 8 million contacts that are being engaged by this financial services company, it's hard to do that at scale. And so that's what our software does. It says, all right, we need to help organizations identify where is the consumer's attention. What are the optimal channels, thus omni-channel? What are the optimal channels to engage that market? And then how do we orchestrate communication that's going to engage those folks, whether that be print and Facebook, print and Instagram, TikTok and print, whatever the case may be, in order to achieve the objectives that the company has. And that's, in a nutshell, what our platform does.
Super. I want to encourage people to call you, to contact you, however you want to be reached out to.
Yes, exactly.
And connect. I want to mention the Pixels and Ink podcast that you do for agencies and printers. People can find that wherever they go get their podcasts. And we'll post some information here for people to contact. So I want to thank you. This is enlightening. I'm thrilled to see what you guys are doing, and I'm delighted to refer people to you. And I hope people come and ask you to visit with them and determine what they might need in their assessments.
Jan, thank you. And folks, if you're listening to the podcast, you can't see me gesticulating here, but I'm super pumped up about this. And we have an organization full of people that are just as jacked up as I am about this kind of stuff. So we'd love to talk to you, B2B, B2C, organizations alike, commercial printers, agencies, whoever you may be. If you're finding that what Jan and I are talking about here resonates, yes, Jan, yes, Dave, it's harder than ever for me to engage my audience. I'm having difficulties. What is it that I'm missing? It might be this conversation today that's the thing that creates that connection for you. Jan, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. I really appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure. I'm delighted. This is for people who need to change things up because their email isn't working, their social media isn't satisfying. It's time to add something to your mix.
Amen. Thank you, Jan.
Sure.